So this is our season finale, everybody, and we are taking a break after 12 consecutive weekly meetings that we've run. And if you want to sort of catch up on what we've done, we have a box set of season 1, which is on our YouTube channel, which is PPD Learning channel on YouTube. And of the 12, so this is number 12, 2 were interactive. So those are we don't have videos of those. We had 2 special guests. We had Judith Deloja, and we had Deborah Bacon-Dilts come on as our special guests. And then we had sessions on resilience, dealing with stress, goals and values, metaphors and archetypes, communication and relationships, transforming beliefs, somatic intelligence and the Alexander technique, and today's is going to be on framing and reframing. So I hope you'll be able to go and look at the box set. If you're missing us for a bit, you'll be able to find some, the idea was just to offer some tips and reminders of core NLP things to kind of help us along, cheer us along, help ourselves and each other come through this period. And even though we're all in very different places emotionally, physically, you know, in terms of how we're spending our time and our days and our attention, obviously the intention from Muriel and me was to provide something that would be of help to everyone and anyone, no matter what your situation is. It's a strange time for all of us. So that was the purpose of the sort of CommuniZooms, was to cheer each other along in this thing. The reason I'm taking my top off is so you can see my t-shirt, which says, "So long and thanks for all the fish." my dolphin t-shirt. But we do have, even though this is the season finale on framing and reframing, we do have 2 events coming up, which we have designed to also support people at this kind of critical time. One is about how we're using language, and we're drawing from all of the amazing applied linguistic tools from the NLP toolkit that are so rich and so you know, powerful, how we use our words to make a difference, and how we use our words to heal and bring resources and help people get creative for themselves and for their communities, for their world. So how we use words, particularly conversationally, how you can use your language in such a way that you're not really doing a technique with somebody, you're just really talking with them. And so really bringing these very powerful tools and approaches to our listening and our modeling of people through language, and being able to ask really great questions, but be able to use, you know, metaphor and understanding of people's language to make a difference. And our second one is a co-presentation with Judith Deloja, one of the co-developers of the whole field of NLP. And we are doing a version across 4 half days of our international, and this time up to date, it's called Summer 2020 package for leadership in the community, leadership of yourself, with others, and for the really looking to the future, how we can be aligned and present and ready and creative, work with other people to make a difference. So do check those out on our website and in our newsletter. So today is on framing and reframing. Again, the purpose of this is just to remind you of some of our basic tools and frameworks for change and for learning. So reframing, people mainly do that on their practitioner program, and it's the idea that words set a kind of an intelligible framework around, you know, data. Words help us to pattern and organize and perceive and make sense of our world, so that the way that we use language particularly affects the kinds of pictures that we're making in our mind. You know, it's like we're making pictures all the time, and relationships between things and how we describe them are going to, it is going to organize how we interpret those pictures and make meaning. And that's, of course, you know, a cause in motion around the sort of choices that we perceive and the actions that we'll take. The story that I love the most about framing and reframing is that Taoist story about, you know, someone is a farmer, and you know, in their part of the world, horses are of great high value. And one day an amazing stallion horse kind of comes into this farmer's field, and everyone goes, oh, what a lucky person you are, you know, what a gift from the gods, kind of thing. And the farmer just goes, maybe. So just takes that, you know, maybe. And then the next day the horse is gone, and all the villagers gather around and they go, oh, what terrible bad luck that is. You had this horse and now it's gone. What terrible bad luck. And he goes, maybe. And then the next day that horse comes back and brings a whole herd of horses, wild horses, into the field. And everyone's go, oh my goodness me, your fortune overflows. How absolutely amazing that is. And again, well, maybe. And the next day, you know, the farmer's son gets up on a horse and the horse rears, and the farmer's son breaks his leg, which in a rural agricultural community is a bit of a disaster, to lose one of your main people who's able to work, you know. And everyone comes, oh, what a terrible tragedy as this is, you know, broken leg, maybe, maybe. The next day, soldiers come to the village and they take away all the young men who can fight. And everyone goes, oh, you know, you're so lucky your son got saved. And goes, well, maybe. And so that's, you know, that's just a lovely story, I think, about shifting frames, just shifting those frames to, you know, to make meaning of what's happening, to make meaning of what's happening. So another story I like is where reframing in NLP came from. A lot of it came from people like Virginia Satir's work. And there's a lovely story in the Framing, Reframing early book in NLP, which is about this woman who loves her fluffy carpet. And she won't let any of the family walk across it. And so like, you know, and it's driving them all crazy, because she's just become sort of obsessed by this, you know, this carpet where the pile should be completely, you know, pristine with no indents where people have trodden on it. And so this is a reframe that, so she and the family, you know, this is part of something that comes up in family therapy with Virginia Satir, and the family start kind of complaining about this. And Virginia Satir says apparently something like this. She says, I want you to think about your carpet and how it's all smooth. And this woman is going, yeah, my lovely smooth carpet. And she goes, and that means you are completely alone. And it just, you know, shifts around that meaning. And starts the process of making a change, obviously. So we're all playing around with frames all the time, putting some things more in the foreground, some things more in the background. You know, frames create borders and constraints. They guide our attention. They make sense of what we perceive. They are what we perceive. Language is a perceptual tool. It's organizing our world for us all the time, carving out some things and not others, and making sense along certain lines all the time. We are co-creating our world through language all the time. Language is a modeling process. It's organizing and patterning through, as we know, deletion, distortion, generalization all the time. And I think at the moment, you know, we're used to thinking of our language and playing around with language, going, well, what's the proper name for something? Is it a protest? Is it a riot? Is it an uprising? You know, is that illness? Is it a plague? Is it a bug? Is it a pandemic? You know, it's like, what's the right word for things? Are we in a lockdown or are we sheltering in place? You know, the different kinds of words that we use determine the kind of experience and reactions and responses that we're making to things. So the big three frames, I would say, in NLP, just to kind of set a kind of overall frame for this, is we have an outcome frame that organizes what we want. It makes things relevancy. It sets a direction. It organizes resources, gathers and mobilizes our attention and resources to kind of move towards something. And so you focus then on the goal if you have an outcome frame. And that's in contrast and comparison to a problem frame, where you're more focused on symptoms and causes, and the problems, what you can't do, what can't happen. And so you have these two frames. The outcome frame, you're more asking, what do I want? How can I get it? You know, what resources are available? With more of a problem frame, you're asking, what's wrong? Why is it a problem? You know, what caused it? Who can I blame? They're very different frames that we're working with in an NLP point of view, where obviously we're moving primarily from a problem frame to an outcome frame, which is why very, very often the answer to what should I do next is really, so what is your goal? You know, what's your goal then now? What is it that you want? So you're helping someone who's kind of lost in a problem or lost in a story or an issue, going, well, what is it that you actually want? Because once we've established that framework, everything else is in the service of that. So the other frame, another one of the frames is this as if frame, which is the one where we can step in imaginatively and experience how it would be if we'd already achieved our goals, what that sort of achievement and success with an outcome would feel like, look like, sound like, be like. And again, that's a kind of frame that we're using in NLP. Well, what will it be like? You know, let's step in as if you could do it. What's that like? And from there, you can start to wonder what's missing, what might need to be developed, you know, what other outcomes might you have. But you have this experiential framework of stepping in imagination to go, how will this, you know, what will it actually be like if you have this? It's this step forward into the future, as though something, you know, acting as if you already could do something or already had achieved something. And then I think the third frame in terms of overall frameworks of change inside of NLP is, of course, the feedback versus failure framework. You know, the feedback framework is where you take resistances and obstacles as learning. You take it as feedback and learning about what you might do differently next time. It's not like a sort of full stop. So the feedback framework, when things happen, allow you to get curious, allow you to make certain kinds of error corrections. The failure framework tends not only to stop you in your tracks, but to often people spiral with that. Oh, it didn't happen. And then they jump up maybe to identity. I'll never be able to do that. I'm this type of person, not that type of person. So, so those are three of our main frameworks in NLP: an outcome framework rather than a problem framework, an as if framework, moving into an imagined experience and working from that, and a feedback versus failure framework. So I also wanted to touch on some of the basic kind of practitioner type framing, reframing type exercises that you do on a program. One of them, if you'll remember, is the idea of context reframing. And this is the idea that everything's useful somewhere. You know, we're the kind of original ecologists. We never throw anything away. We're never just trying to stop a behavior or just like throw things away. We're always going, well, that's interesting. That's an interesting thing. Where can I use that? You know, where's a useful context for that behavior or those, you know, those choices? So in other words, everything has a kind of a context frame around it. All behavior lives inside a context, but also all behavior is a kind of example of a capability that somebody has. And so everything's useful somewhere. All behaviors are useful in some context. Everything somewhere could be a resource, can be a capability, and clue to capabilities that you have that maybe currently are being, you know, incorrectly kind of allocated into, you know, unhelpful contexts. So the question, often the exercises, certainly one of the exercises that I've done with this is to get people to do a sentence that says, oh, well, I'm too X, some kind of problem behavior. So you have this kind of problem statement. Well, I'm too bossy, I'm too lazy, I'm too stupid, I'm too angry, I'm too short-tempered, or, you know, whatever it might be. So you have like this problem type of statement. And we can already see as NLPers a lot of things that are kind of like, as it were, wrong with that. On the one hand, you've got a statement that equates an identity, I'm to something with a behavior. So we already know that that's kind of like not right, that an identity can't be the same as a behavior. That's already an error in logic. And it's something that we can do with language, of course. We can create these kind of weird errors in logic where it seems like everything about us is, through the verb to be, is the same as this. So, so what we're looking at is taking something that appears to be a fault or a sort of negative or a weakness or something like that. And then we're asking, okay, so where would that be useful? Where would that behavior actually be a positive thing, not a negative thing, but a positive thing? So you might say, you know, where would being lazy, you know, I never really use the word lazy, but where would something like being lazy be a positive thing? So you might start to think, well, what does lazy mean? It means, you know, maybe slowing down, maybe not really, you know, allowing yourself to make some space and time, you know, in other ways. Where might that be helpful? Well, it might be helpful on holiday. It might be helpful at the weekends. It might be helpful in lunch hours or something like that. Again, you're not trying to solve things. You're using reframing to just be able to see and experience something different about that heretofore negatively perceived quality. You go, oh, I've always thought of that as negative, but now if you put it in that context, I see it as a positive. So that's a kind of very simple kind of form of reframing, I go, I'm too negative, negative something. Oh, where would that be useful? Oh, I see. Now, it doesn't mean that's the whole job done, of course, with that as a process of change, because you might want to do a kind of second part to go, you know, what's an outcome that you have that now arises naturally out of this kind of exploration. And people might say, well, I want to use my time better, or I want to, you know, whatever it might be. So it may be that there's a kind of two-step thing where you go, well, where would that be useful? That's interesting. You're saying that's negative. I see that as totally positive, because it could be positive there. In fact, it could be the only worthwhile aspect of that context. Really brilliant idea of a resource. So what is it that you want, which may be to do with having some kind of outcome in this situation for yourself that, again, helps you reperceive, reorganize data and elements that are already there, but reorganize them into a map, as it were, this map or model, reorganize that into something more helpful and useful for you. So that sort of, and context is an amazing one, where, you know, where the context and the frames and the boundaries that you put around your perceptions determine, you know, so much about what we can see. I mean, as we're tend to be quite unsystemic thinkers, you know, taking the context away from things that people have said and done is sort of something that we can do. You see it on social media, for example, all the time. You see somebody does one tweet and they are forever doomed, or, you know, somebody does one thing on Instagram or one thing on Facebook, and everything else that person's ever said or done is now kind of tainted from this one thing. So a lot of things get decontextualized. And I think we're dealing with quite a lot of that at the moment. We're trying to put sort of historical information around certain things to do with, you know, colonialism, and to do with, you know, what's happening right now in all the kind of protests that we're seeing. There's a reperceiving of context of things like statues in a public space and the different kinds of meanings that they might have if you put back some of the history that's got sort of deleted, distorted, generalized out of it in order to promote certain perspectives and not others. So, blah, blah. And that happens in arguments as well, of course. We decontextualize. I mean, the great question when you're in a kind of argument or discussion with somebody is like, well, who started it? I'm sure those of you who've got kids at home who've kind of from time to time, you know, got themselves into arguments. It's like that great question, well, who started it? Well, we don't know. It depends where you put your context markers, doesn't it? Often things are very interactive, and the context is the whole of the relationship and what things mean. We're all quite good at decontextualizing. So the issue is it's really what types of context make things more understandable and more kind of rich for us in our models of the world. It's not that you're always endlessly recontextualizing things. It's like, has this lost some context? Is that why I'm blaming? Or is that why I'm feeling a victim? Or is that why, you know, certain things are happening? So I think the other ways that we add context are through time frames and through, you know, perceptual positions and things like that. And I will go back to that if we have time at the end. The one I wanted to remind us all of, though, which I think is such a tremendous framework, is the framework of positive intention. I mean, it's life-changing, I think. It's kind of healing. It's kind of completely reorganizes a whole experience. And the idea of it is that what we say is that all behavior has, or at one point did have, some kind of positive type of intention, motivational value that drives it from the inside. So in other words, what we're saying is that people do things for reasons because we're trying to fulfill our values and our sense of what matters and what's important. It's just that the behavior, so that's at another level. You could say intention at this level. And then at this level, we select different kinds of behaviors which we hope will fulfill the value at this level, or the positive type intention at this level. And they're not the same thing. You know, behaviors not the same as intention. It's very, very interesting. It's one of the most misunderstood, I think, of the NLP presuppositions, because people kind of take the behavior and they go, well, that's not positive. No, the behavior may not be positive. In fact, it may be very negative and destructive and hurtful. However, the intention that drives it is a positive one. If you think of like what might be the positive intention behind something like bullying, for example, it's that that person gets to feel good and powerful or something like that. That's a positive intention. And often the worst behaviors have intentions behind them like safety, protection, feeling good, wanting to feel loved, wanting to feel connected. And yet the map of that person in terms of the choices that they perceive as available to them to fulfill that intention is often very impoverished. And so you're dealing with an impoverished choice range, but the intention itself is one that you can align with and be in rapport with. Yeah, you want for people to feel good about themselves. You don't want them to do it that way. And I think it's making those distinctions that can help people more fully really appreciate and understand this framework, because to understand is not the same as to condone. To understand and acknowledge something that's a positive motivation from inside of the map of another person is not the same thing as to condone that behavior. So this is a very kind of healing, it's a way of bringing integration and alignment to somebody. It's a way of recontextualizing an unwanted or difficult behavior inside of a larger framework of goal and intention and values, meaningful values. And so I think that that's quite a nice exercise for ourselves, going like, well, here's a behavior that puzzles me, that I have, or that I don't like, or that I want to get rid of. What really is the positive intention of that behavior? What really am I trying to fulfill at the level of intention? And the same thing would be a good exercise to do about somebody else's behavior, you know, that you don't understand or you don't appreciate or you really don't want. Like and it's like asking that question, what's really going on? What's really driving this person? What are they trying to achieve at the level of values, even though they're failing miserably? You know, what is it? Let's at least acknowledge what it is they're going for. And then let's see if we can help them have a more rich and extended range of choices in their model of the world. That's what 6-step reframing is about. It's like, let's bring on more choices, all of which have the potential to fulfill this intention at this higher level, and then select ones that will work better and more ecologically for the person. That's what we say. People make the best choices they can, given the model of the world that they're coming from. They'll make the best choices. So what people need is richer choices, more distinctions, more possibility and potential about how you fulfill a basic organizing intention like safety, connection, you know, feeling good about yourself, feeling like you could belong, feeling like you're visible to people, all of those kinds of things. So I wanted to do more on like this idea of one word reframing. I don't think I've only got like really about another minute. I start with that Bertrand Russell thing where he says, I am firm, you are obstinate, he is a pig-headed fool. That idea that there's this kind of slippage between words, and that you can find these little one-word reframes that make things somewhat better or somewhat worse. So I am righteously furious, you are annoyed, and, she is making a fuss about nothing. You can see that kind of, they're roughly the same ballpark meaning, but when you make those distinctions, they're carriers of very different meanings and relationships. So just really thinking about how you're using your words. I once did something at the conference in which I said, I am a Judithosaurus. But it made me sound like a dinosaur. And what I meant to sound like more was like a thesaurus. I'm somebody who's constantly trying to come up with, well, is it like this? Is it like that? Let's see if we can find the right kinds of words for this issue. And I think Stephen Gilligan, I'll just sort of finish on this. Stephen Gilligan has come up with this wonderful way of capturing that, which he calls proper naming. Proper naming. And he says the thing about proper naming is it does tell the truth. We're not saying that like the worst thing that ever happened is like, oh, it's a wonderful opportunity, and everybody, it's just such a mismatch to people's feelings and experience at certain points to say that it doesn't feel like it's telling the truth. It has to, whatever you say, however you change your words, has to feel like it's telling the truth. And people go, yes, that is how it is. And another condition is it needs to, the way you talk about something needs to be triggering resources in the person and in the system, that it triggers resources and a sense of capability, and it preserves and strengthens all the positive intentions in the system. So I think that's finding those right words, doing this kind of one word reframe. And then of course, there's so many other different frames and reframes. The Sleight of Mouth book has, 14 different examples. I just hold up. So this is Robert's Sleight of Mouth book. It has like some sort of 14 different ways of using your language to help make a difference for somebody, to help heal something, update something, transform something through your words, and to help shift the model of the world of the person such that they live in a world of potential, in a world of possibility, and of better, more ecological, worthwhile, helpful, useful kinds of choices. So I hope that you're, I know that you're already doing lots of framing and reframing. I think some of the big questions for us, how are you going to talk about this time? How do you talk about it for yourself and for others in such a way that your words carry, hope and resources to yourself and others, and healing in the bigger system? How are we going to talk about the future? How are we going to talk about our plans and possibilities? Now, so much has changed and more will change because of the situation that we're in. So those are like sort of final questions. As I say to those of us who weren't with us at the beginning, we're taking a pause on, this is our season 1 finale, and we have loved being with you every week. It's been a joy and a privilege to be part of all of our journeys week on week, just to sort of say hello to everybody and, as I say, cheer each other along our way with tools and skills and reminders of what we know and what we can do to help ourselves and to help other people. I don't know, Muriel, do you want to come in before I just say our final farewell? I want to thank Muriel, of course. Muriel?
Oh, It's been really lovely to do these every week, and it's been great to see how many people have turned up and listening to folks' contributions, and I've thoroughly enjoyed them, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the sessions. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Muriel, who's kind of really made it all possible. So I will say, love you all. Keep practicing your NLP. Stay well, stay safe, stay happy. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. You know, we love you. We hope to see you again soon. And all the other recordings are on our YouTube channel. The box set is on the YouTube channel, PPD Learning. So for now, lots of love from me and Muriel.